Very warm greetings and welcome to today's edition of the African Leadership Group, the Nigerian Leadership Series. I want to thank and welcome everybody very warmly for being part of this conversation today, and to thank you for being part of this great dream. My name is Itwa Igodalo, and I'm happy to be here this very day. Today, I feel a sense of personal loss. We started the rites of the late Otumba Shubomi Balogun, a titan of Nigerian history and the banking industry. Since Tuesday, his body is on the way to Jebu now, and I just want us to thank God for his life and pray a prayer of comfort to his family. Well, that is the way of life. Somebody was telling me at the funeral or the line in state today, says we must stop meeting in places like this. I said to the person, I don't think we'll stop meeting in places like this, because this is the way of life. People will come, people will go. There'll be somebody's turn next, but what it is that may we not go before our own time. So my comfort to the family, to the Shubomi Balogun family, to his wife, Olori Abimbola, and also to the entire staff of FCMB and his 4 wonderful sons and grandchildren. May the Lord comfort us all. Today on our program, we are digging deeper into this question of education and what do we do with education. Education is the fulcrum, is the background, is the basis, is the foundation of a lot of things in Nigeria. And developing from our comments on education that we had a couple of weeks ago, we thought we should dig a bit deeper into the educational sector and see what's going on in there. And we have on the platform somebody who is more than ably qualified to dig into education for us and to find out what to do and how to do it and how to make it happen. Our guest today has a BSc honors degree from the University of Ibadan, an MBA from the University of Lagos, a postgraduate diploma from the University of Nottingham, and an MA in education also from the University of Nottingham. Her past assignment was being Commissioner for Education in Lagos State during the first tenure of education of Babajide Sanwo-Olu's administration. Before appointment, she was an active player in the education sector in Nigeria, having over spanning banking operations, organizational restructuring, human resource management, and then many years of leadership in the management of education. She's an Ibadan girl. We grew up together in the sleepy city of Ibadan. And her mother also, I believe, was an educationist, and I know that her sister runs a school or did run a school in Ibadan. And her brothers were very troublesome boys, especially the one that was my classmate. Very troublesome. We call him Tafi Morgan. I think he might be on the platform. And we're both naughty boys together doing A-levels and running around the streets of Ibadan. So she's my sister, and I'm happy that she has agreed to be part of this conversation. And she and I have tried in the past to do a few things in education. She's given quite a lot of counsel and advice. Please welcome with me Mrs. Folasade Adefisayo. My dear sister, thank you for agreeing to be on the platform. Thank you for your robust comments. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your interest in education. And sorry to put you out of your little rest before your next assignment to talk about something you're so passionate about. You are welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, Pastor, and thank you for the introduction. I'm glad you didn't gloss over your days in Ibadan with my brother.
Tafi and Fela, tough boys.
They should be on the platform somewhere.
I'm sure. Tafi Morgan. Right. Thank you for coming. So, I don't know, we're going to be speaking today on the constitutional requirements for education reform. So we're looking at education, we're looking at education reform, we're looking at the state of our constitution, and we're looking at what then to do. But to serve as a background and as a template, maybe you need to tell me or tell our people, how did you get involved in education? You are obviously one of the most passionate people about education that I've seen in a long time. Anything education gets you prepped up, excited, and so on and so forth. And then you can then dovetail into that and tell us a little background of the history of education in Nigeria and maybe the state of education now. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me. That was quite a long question, and I hope I won't give a very long answer. But I was a banker, as you read from my profile, and I got caught up in the collapse of banks and finance houses. And at that point, before then, I'd been teaching at Institute of Bankers, other institutes training bankers. So I really loved facilitating and teaching, and I could see this was my forte. Then I just saw an advert in the papers, a group of schools asking for a CEO, and I applied. And I got the job, and that was with the Corona Schools Trust Council, and so that was how I became CEO. And it was while I was there that I really got deep into education, that I saw that, look, it's not, of course, as a parent or as someone who went to school, you always think you know, but you really don't until you start the practice of it. You see, there's a lot of depth to it. There's a lot more to it than you taking your children to school, you being angry with your class teacher, and so on. And so I got deeper and deeper, and that was why I went for those certifications, the PGD in education, PGC in education, and the Masters in Education from Nottingham. I ended up, after being the CEO of the Corona Schools, I ended up as the director of the secondary school, which was a voluntary step taken. I really wanted to work in school, to run a school, not just a group of schools. And so there I was, resident in school for over 4 years, running schools. And that for me was a seminal experience. And that really, again, got me to understand more about education. I started consulting for a lot of bodies. When I finished, I was development partners for private schools, for public institutions. I even ended up in Osun State running a public secondary school, which again was a great experience that made me really understand children and their motivations for going to school and how we can improve results. I think I'm starting to be a bit of an expert in how you can actually improve learning outcomes without spending too much money. We're working on the software of school, which I will always believe is more critical than the hardware that is infrastructure, which is of course important, please don't get me wrong. And so from there, after Osun State, I just came back, I was just consulting when I was called on by Lagos State to be the Commissioner for Education, and I served for like 3.5 years, just ending my tenure on the 29th of May. And I thank God for that. Long lessons learned, but I won't go into that now. I'll just talk about the education sector. I'm lucky that I've seen it from various perspectives. As a private sector player in top schools and so on, and as a public sector player in 2 states. Apart from working in the private schools, what's called the elite schools, I also was kind of like a patron or a supporter of the association that was in charge of non-registered low-cost schools in Lagos. And I did a number of studies on low-cost schools in Lagos. So I think that got me into the understanding about how we are going to help more and more children to go to school. And I think the state that we are in now is rather dire, honestly, for many indices. And I'd like to piggyback on the last presentation by Mrs. Bumi Lawson, which really triggered me because it talked about a lot of the issues, the access issues. There are just not enough schools. They're just not enough. I wouldn't talk about Lagos State exclusively. Of course, I'll keep going in and out of Lagos State since I work here. There are just not enough schools around the state. And that's why you have all these out of school children. I mean, now the data is even strange because we have 13 million, 10 million, and 20 million. I would err on the side of caution and go for like 20 and try and do something about bringing the numbers down. So let's say we have these out of school children. One of the major problems they have is there's just not enough places that are called schools. Apart from access, we have equity issues. If you look at the quality of schools in our environment, some of our schools can compete with some of the best schools everywhere, but they tend to be private schools, even up to tertiary level. And I tend to talk more about primary and secondary because that is my area of competence. I will not delve into tertiary much. Even at tertiary level, you see that the private schools are outperforming public schools. They are outperforming low-cost schools. And therefore, you see more and more that low-cost public schools are becoming poor quality schools for the poor. Honestly, that is how you can describe so many of them, which is so sad across the whole country. So there are equity issues that the quality of education you get is dependent on your economic circumstances. There are also quality issues. We've seen it with when you want to measure quality. Of course, you look at learning outcomes at literacy levels, numeracy levels. And remember what Mrs. Lawson said about us focusing on literacy and numeracy. If you can get that right, if you are literate, you will do all that. You'll be able to, and if you build in 21st century skills, there'll be curiosity and people will want to learn about science and so on. But the basic thing that a child should go to school for, we are not even getting that right. So in terms of quality, it's terrible. When we look at WAEC, which is one of the ways we measure our learning outcomes, is ridiculous to me because you can't measure the quality of your curriculum after 12 years. Because of course, the quality is the curriculum. What are we teaching children? I'm not a proponent of going around looking for other curricula. The Nigerian curriculum can be worked on, and everywhere I've worked, I've tried to look at the Nigerian curriculum and see how we can bring it to the 21st century. Some of the major problems of the Nigerian curriculum include how we even assess that learning is taking place. So there's so much focus on what we call the lower order thinking skills, name, list, define, explain, rather than, the higher order thinking skills where you start to create, where you start to assess, where you start to evaluate, where you start to, change stories and change narratives. So I think so quality is major. I can go on and on about quality. And of course, there's leadership and governance, which is where I come in and where I think we need to lay a lot of emphasis on. Because when it comes to leadership and governance, and you're talking about focus, about what is our vision as a country? Why are we educating our children? What's the point? Why are we sending children to school? We have to have a defined vision. And from that vision, we'll define our strategy. And we'll now use that strategy to design a structure that will enable us to implement that strategy. The present structure that we have for implementing education is not going to make things better because I think right from the constitutional requirements down to the state laws, down to the level of governance, the bureaucracy, I think we haven't designed a structure that can support whatever. We don't even know what we want anyway. So we haven't designed a structure that will support what we want. So their quality, the leadership and governance issues. And there's another one, and that's relevance. So at the end of the day, why should children go to school, like I said? What we find is that a lot of children who don't go to school, if you find out why, it's because it's not relevant to them. It's not because some want to go, but some of their parents feel it's irrelevant. And again, I piggyback on Mrs. Lawson's speech. You have a big farm, you have a farm, your children are helping on the farm. It doesn't help you for the children to go to school. It's best for them to work with you on the farm. So how do we make sure that we develop an educational system that is accessible, that is equitable, that is qualitative, that is based on a defined vision and structure, and that is relevant to every child. In other words, every child deserves chance. And that's my reading, and that's my concern now. And the reason why you say, oh, but you were in government. Oh, yeah, I think I did my bit there. But I think what concerns me most is that we people who I will consider elite are not, please permit me, I don't want to sound arrogant. We are not asking the right questions. We are not informing ourselves. We are not understanding how the Constitution works and how states can run schools, how local governments can run schools, and what questions and what accountabilities and responsibilities we should be insisting upon. We should insist, we should be having those conversations. But what I find is, I don't think the conversations go deep enough. So like I said, please forgive me if I sound like know all, but that's my reading, that we need to start asking very deep questions and insisting that people do the right thing. Thank you. I hope I didn't. Teachers talk too much, Pastor. That's our problem.
Just like pastors. Pastors talk too much. You give a pastor a microphone. Until he takes something, he won't stop.
I know.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I think you've really given us food for thought and something to chew on. But I have two questions for you right now. Number one, how did Nigeria get to the state where you have 20 million, even if it's 30 million children out of school? How is that possible? How did that happen? Have we always had out of school children? Was there a lack of funding or we didn't have enough money?
I didn't mention funding. Sorry, I didn't mention funding. I lumped it under leadership. Yeah. Thank you for bringing up funding.
Yeah. How did you get to that stage? Yeah.
We've always had out of school children. We've always had. Even when we were going to school, how many secondary schools did we have in Oyo State, for instance, in Western region? How many? I remember I served in a state in the Northeast. They had about 25 secondary schools when I was doing my youth service. So you can imagine how many children were out of school. So we've always had, but now we've signed into so many protocols that require that every child deserves to go to school. No child should be left behind. We've signed the Child Rights Act. We've implemented it in many states, and therefore we expect children to go to school. We put it in our constitution that children should go to school for 9 years, minimum of 9 years of basic education. And so that's why it has come to the fore. We've always had it. I don't want us to gloss over it. But 20 million, whether it's 20 million or 10, my belief has always been even one is one too many. On top of 20 children too many. We've always had. Funding is also another issue I forgot to mention. Sorry, forgive me. We are not funding education appropriately. It all comes from the governance. It all comes from the constitutional requirements. Because, the constitutional requirement, and can I go on, or do you want to ask another question?
No, go on. I think you can.
Because the constitutional requirement is that federal government is responsible for tertiary education. States are responsible, really, for senior secondary education. Local government responsible for basic education and early years. But look at the funding. Look at how we are funding these tiers of government. Let's start from the local government. Which local government can look after the schools in their neighborhood, pay teachers' salaries, put in place right policies, monitor and evaluate that learning is going on, provide students with resources, and build infrastructure, maintain infrastructure? Which local government has the funds to do that? Local governments, apart from the fact that they don't have funding, that is also where the lowest quality of human capital is, frankly. That is where, because, I like to say the education secretaries and the local governments are the commissioners in the local governments. They're responsible for all the primary schools in their local government. Are we funding them? Are these people, are they capable of doing this job?
He's outside doing the washing.
Pardon?
No, not you. Falabi, please mute your mic.
Okay. So are they capable? Are they competent? And are they funded? the one thing that most of them, the only thing they are doing is paying teachers' salaries in a lot of states. And some states are not even paying teachers' salaries. And these salaries is because the salaries come direct from the federal government and go straight to teachers' salaries. Otherwise, they have very little money to do anything. And then when you go to the states are supposed to be responsible for senior secondary. But I must say, I totally think that this is where I want us to hold states more accountable. There's nothing wrong with local governments being in charge of primary schools. They are neighborhood schools. It's all right. Children will go in the neighborhood. They are supposed to be part of the neighborhood. But when you talk about secondary, about the whole thing, states should be responsible for everything, from early years to senior secondary. They should partner with local governments. But we have seen in some instances where nobody partners with anybody. And the local governments are on their own, managing something they can barely manage. They are barely eking out an existence. And you are saying they should look after 100 schools in their local government. So at the end of the day, so the foundation is so wrong already. So we can talk about private schools, but remember that across the country, the bulk of the children that we have are in public schools. So the bulk of the children are going to schools that are really, really in very bad shape. So I think the funding model, the constitutional model itself, I've always felt it to be wrong. But I read a story about, I read the life of Theodore Roosevelt recently. Was president of the US around 1909. And a situation arose where labor was fighting with the coal industry, the coal owners, the coal mine owners. And it was felt that this is a capitalist country. The president shouldn't get involved in this discussion. Let them fight themselves. But you know what he said, and I wish I could quote it verbatim, but he said something like, a president, the executive cannot afford not to get involved when the society expects it of them, unless the Constitution explicitly forbids them. And this is where I want to plead and say that states should count themselves responsible for primary education. Some states do and fund it significantly. And this is where I'd like to. I don't want, like I said, I'm not publicizing what I did or what Lagos State did, but I will say that as a state, this is a state that accepts that we are also in charge of primary education, but that means it stretches the budget significantly. So I think funding is a major issue. Federal government has tried with SUBEB and UBEC, but it's not enough. Not at all. Not by any standards. It's not enough.
Yeah, but why is funding an issue? Is it because the federal government does not allocate enough money to education? Is this mechanism whereby everybody goes to the federal government for fund allocation, FAC, every month and so on and so forth? Is it not possible for the local government to be self-financing, self-sustaining, generating enough funds? And what do we do to our constitution to help us transform education?
Well, I don't want to get involved in matters like the concurrent nature, but I think that more like the federal structure and so, but I do think that more things can be pushed to the local governments. Their sources of funding are very minimal. There are many local governments, and look, apart from the fact that it's minimal, I accept that many people are just not creative enough to know how to raise funds in their states. They are just not creative enough. They are just not going to do other things. And I actually served in a state where somebody came to me and said, the state is afraid to raise taxes, that I worked in Lagos. I've now retired home, and I went to the Ministry of Finance to say, how do I pay tax here? But nobody knows. So I continue paying my taxes in Lagos, in a poor state where they could hardly fund anything. So you can see that there's that case of just sheer this dependence on the federal government every month, like to say, FAC, everybody sees a FAC, they're going to give us money. Even when it's dwindling for virtually every month, but at least something will come in. teachers will get their salaries. Then they sit down and do nothing. So I think it's a question of us again looking at that concurrent list and saying, what other things can we push so that we increase the income of local governments? But on the other hand, how do we strengthen the local governments? I'm a great proponent of local governments being in charge of primary schools because they are local schools in their community and they understand their community. But they are so poorly funded and so poorly run that I don't think they can cope with their responsibilities. Or we change the constitution and push primary schools to the state, which is a long process and a difficult one because it's a difficult one. Too many people would be against it. So we really have to think through. And what is best? What is best for the children? Is it to stay under the local government? If it's to stay under the local government, let's fund the local government appropriately. Let's give them more. Let's push more funds to local governments and insist that this portion should go to education, not just give them more, a carte blanche. No, give them more, but insist that this percentage should go to education. Because the federal budget itself, you know what it goes for. When people fight and say, the federal budget is not 26%, what if it's 26%? What is it going to do? You know what the interest of the federal government is the model colleges, the universities, and then all the myriad of agencies around them. Is somebody in Abuja going to be interested in the child in Araromi Ilogu or in Akarakumo? No. It's best if it's in the local area. So I still think the funding model is significant. It needs some change. And this needs a lot of conversation around it. And let's stop saying, well, this 26%. 26% to do what? Because everybody knows that Nigeria does have the largest budget for education in sub-Saharan Africa. It's what you do with it that now matters.
Well, you've stirred up a small honestness there. So I'm going to take you up on that. We have a budget for education. What are we doing with it? That's number one. Number two, if you could wave your magic wand or do something or advise government or even be able to take charge of education in Nigeria, and you had all the means and the power to do what you needed to do, how would you help us leapfrog education? What would you do? How would you make sure that the 20 or 10 million children are all back in school? What would be your Marshall Plan or your roadmap to quickly, in the shortest possible time, transform education in Nigeria and ensure that we get value or quality for that process? It's very, very important.
This is key and I need to talk, but please, can you give me a second? My power is running out. I didn't want to use this device. So I'm trying so that I can power up the iPad. Yes, if I could. There are low-hanging fruits and there are long-term things that we need to do. The long-term would be constitutional reforms. The long-term things would be, things like even managing the bureaucracy. How do we manage the bureaucracy? The short-term things would be the things that I think we should do immediately. Technology is going to be a great, great accelerator. Some people have done the maths and found that we need 100,000 classrooms. There's no way we are going to build 100,000 classrooms in the next 50 years. So we will continue to have these children out of school. But technology is an accelerator, it's a driver, it's a tool. And this is something that we can use. I think first of all, we have to look at what we have in our environment. We have a lot of underutilized buildings, underutilized institutions, underutilized facilities in neighborhoods. Even if you go into villages, you will see the town hall. I've worked with a lot of NGOs who are now, during the time that we had COVID, and children were not going to school. And it was like, how do we help these children? And we found that many of our children, even in a place like this, Lagos State, do not have access to internet. Some don't even have radio. When we tried radio, some don't even have radios. We raised money for radios, 2,000 per radio. Some children don't have access to radios. So some of the NGOs that we worked with said they would put, we would of course, record lessons and so on. And then they would play at major communal centers, like marketplaces, like maybe there's a quiet place in the market. There's always somewhere in the market where there are not many people, or there's a village square, or there's a village hall, or within urban areas, there are places where we would actually put, loudspeakers and have children coming to school. Sorry, I'm so sorry. So, pardon me again, please. Yes. So I think that the low-hanging fruits would be to work, to collaborate. What I found most important is collaborating with partners, private sector, NGOs, development partners, all students, faith-based institutions, all around the country. And we would play this thing. We would play our classes and the children would listen. We would work with institutions like teaching at the right level. Teaching at the right level means that if a child is reading at primary 2 level, that he's 10 or 5, you put them together and you have a way of teaching them so that they come up to their right level. And we would work with as many institutions as possible. I think we have to deploy technology. I think we have to deploy there's a lot of pent-up energy. There's a lot of support, a lot of people willing to support. I think that is the low-hanging fruit. Then we will sit down and start to make plans, because we can't rely on this in the long run. In the long run, we have to really have hubs. I've met people who have hubs, like every community. Let there be a hub that the children can go to and learn. We can't build 100,000 classrooms. We have to stop thinking about school as being in 4 walls only. We have to think about schools and stop thinking about schooling, but start thinking about learning. What do we want them to learn? I still want to piggyback on Ms. Lawson. She said something about learning, literacy, and numeracy. That if we can get these 2 right and integrate it in such a way that there's a lot of curiosity, a lot of eagerness to learn, people will keep on learning by themselves. And that's what because at this point, it's too serious a problem for us to start doing baby steps. We have to roll out across the. That is what I would do if asked, and I think that's what we tried to do in Lagos State during the COVID period, so that every child would at least learn during this period, and the learning slide would be minimized. The long run, I said, you just have to look at the constitution. You have to look at the bureaucracy. You have to look at the way we manage education. We cannot. And funding. How do you, a local government person, they don't even, if you go to their office, they can't even manage their office. How will they manage the infrastructure in schools? How will they help teachers with resources and facilities? So we have to really look at the framework, on how we're spending the money. I'm all for 26%, but that 26% minimum by UNESCO, I think we should spread it out. We shouldn't just, we always look at the federal government budget and say 26%. Remember that the states are responsible for secondary education. What percentage of their budget are they giving to education? So we have to spread it out across all 3 tiers of government so that a significant proportion of our budget is given to education. And then monitor it properly, because you can give money to education and spend it on the director's office and the AC and what do you call it, fridge and so on. You can spend it on building a lot of unnecessary facilities. Or you can spend it, for me as an educationist, you know where I spend money? I spend it on the classroom. I spend it on that interaction between the teacher and the student. That's where I spend my money. That is training the teachers, supporting the teachers, giving them resources, giving the children textbooks, giving them books, giving the teachers tablets, ensuring that the classroom is a comfortable environment for them. I think that is what we've just got to look at it. Long term, medium term, short term. I wish I could go on. There's so many ideas in my head, but I'm trying to stay coherent.
Maybe you should master the ideas one by one, because we need all the ideas
Yeah.
that we get to really help transform education in Nigeria. And I'm glad that you mentioned teachers. What you're thinking on our teacher stock and teacher quality, quantity and quality. I know there was a state, I think it was Kwara State or so, that did exams for their teachers. And it's called that the teachers couldn't even pass elementary exams, and they were supposed to be teaching our children. So what's your thoughts on teachers? And then what's your thought on curriculum? Because some people are also saying that these days curriculum is no longer relevant. And I'm sure you were my guest at the Wellspring discourse on the future of education, where we were now talking about education being relevant, and adding value, such that by the time a guy or a lady has been through an educational process in Nigeria, they are valuable. Because one of the things that is happening in education is that people come out at the other end and they still cannot get jobs, because there's a disconnect between the labor market and the kind of education people are getting. So what's your thoughts on making sure that even if they leave school at SS3 or whatever it is, they can still be employable or add economic value to the society? And by the time they come out of university, each one of them must be immediately employable, like it was in those days. You come out of university and the people are falling all over the place offering you a job. But that looks like a remote story from a remote era. So what really, how do we do it? How can we really push? And where's the people who can help us push to make sure that education gets its rightful place?
Thank you very much, Pastor. These are your questions are the ones that are making me talk for a long time. First, let's look at teachers. Let me look at teachers. A teacher can only give up what he or she has. And I think what is happening now, before, up to now, yeah, we still think teaching is a poor profession for poor people. I remember I had a young teacher years ago, and he said he dated a girl for a year and then wanted to go and visit her parents. So on the way home, she said, please don't tell them you're a teacher. Just tell them you are working somewhere in Lagos Island, so that because the father would be most upset if she married a teacher. I didn't send my daughter to university and all that for her to go and marry a teacher. That was his attitude, but perforce, because of what is happening. And I assure you that teaching is one of the few professions now where people are able to get jobs. So there is this, it's not a strong shift, but maybe I'm romanticizing the work. I can see a slight shift. And don't forget, because of this Japa syndrome, teachers are really getting jobs too, even within and outside the country. So I think there's a slight shift in realizing that teachers are extremely important and we have to look at their training. The problem, there are not enough of them, of course, and they're not enough to go to training school. And the initial teacher training for me is inadequate, because we get teachers who I find cannot teach. You have to train them all over again. But again, I can see a shift, a small shift, in that the NCE curriculum, for instance, has been rejigged. And it's a fair curriculum. It's a fair one. If you look at it, it even includes things like entrepreneurship and teaching them literacy and numeracy using modern methods and so on. So it's a shift, but it's not enough of a shift. And clearly the country has to spend more on training teachers. And states have to spend more on training their teachers. You see, when you train teachers, when you get new teachers, you have to do things like orientation. When they are with you for a while, they need to keep on updating themselves. So we need to have an environment within which teachers update themselves. I'm very excited about some things that I've seen with teachers. That's why I said there is a shift. I'm a member in many, what do you call it, peer sessions with teachers, because I used to train teachers a lot. So they train themselves. Oh, in physics, I taught this thing this way. In chemistry, I taught like this. So again, see the power of technology. They go on to WhatsApp, they go on to social media, and they teach themselves, they share links, and then you start to see that. So this job is exciting. It's interesting. I don't know any job that is more exciting or interesting or more impactful than teaching. If you enjoy it, you love it, you will learn from so many people across the world. You want to teach a concept in physics, that you can ask anybody around the world, literacy, phonology, or whatever. The problem is we have behaved as if teaching is for people who are not clever. And so we are not having people who would be creative enough, interesting enough to be able to change the profession. But again, there is a shift. And I hope it's a long-term thing and not a one-off thing. Like there are organizations like Teach for Nigeria that, anywhere I Teach for Nigeria's fellow teachers, even though they are not educationists, they are regarded as the best teachers. So also there are other organizations now that are deliberately focused on training teachers. And so I see that there is a shift. I can't put numbers to it yet, but I can see a shift, even among teachers themselves, who are now able to stand taller because people are talking about them. I mean, there are states that support them that, I think a state like Lagos State is exciting for a teacher because they can get to permanent secretary level. That's very rare. They can get to permanent secretary level because they can become tutor generals, permanent secretaries in charge of 90 schools, helping them with their teaching and learning and so on. So there is a career path. A lot of things that have been done. TRCN is an exciting organization too that has worked on teachers having a career path, not just come to class, TTT for 30 years and retire, but senior teacher who will have greater responsibilities and so on. So they've drawn it up. You see, the problem is many states are not implementing it. They just get this paper. The TRCN does a lot of work. They just get it and just Anyway, so for teaching, I think we have to do a lot more. We have to do a lot more work. But like I said, there is a small shift happening. It's happening more in the private sector. But I think the private sector, that's why I love what the private sector is doing with teaching and learning. They are leading the way. And because they are leading the way, it's starting to have a ripple effect on other schools. And so that's it. Then look at our curriculum. The problem with our curriculum is fossilized somewhere far away. I don't think there's anything much wrong with it. I say because I've studied it a bit. I did study the biology curriculum for my master's. And what I found was that it's the same as the British curriculum biology. It's the same in most American courses. Biology is biology. The eye is the eye, and so on. Do you know why we have so many issues with it? I think, and I hope people will, as an educationist, for me, the problem for me there is the way we assess that learning has taken place. So when you assess your children, that is why there's something called the Bloom's taxonomy, which I wish I could show on screen now, but maybe someone can help us Google it and look for Bloom's taxonomy. Because when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, and we assess that, what we are assessing in Nigeria is the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy, where we are expecting students to cram and pour. We are not scaling them up to the top of the pyramid, where on top they will even create solutions. Because by the time you get to that level where they're creating solutions, excitement comes in, change comes. And that's where you start to excite things like their thinking order, their critical thinking, their problem solving, their creativity, their innovative skills. They'll have to work in teams and collaborate. And these are 21st century skills. So more and more and more, we have to address even our institutions like WAEC. For me, I would address WAEC and organizations like that. Start pushing the questions up Bloom's taxonomy, so that our students are forced to think. Let me give you an example. I always use the example of the eye that I did, because biology, that WAEC exam said, draw the eye, label the eye, and people label the eye, describe two parts, which means cramp or, The British curriculum equivalent drew 3 eyes, with something wrong with them, and said, explain. And what is wrong with these eyes? That means you have to think. You can only do that if you know the parts of the eye. You have to think through your answer. And so I thought that was seminar, rather than draw and label. Draw and label. People can cram. People cram. I know people who cram. By Monday, by Friday, they have forgotten what they cram. But they would have passed the exam. So again, we have to address the way we assess. And that's why I think there has to be a whole upheaval of our educational management system, where we take educational management as a profession. Not just the teaching. Teaching is critical, it's important, but educational management, the people who prepare our curriculum, the people who design our tests and questions and quizzes and exams and so on, the people who design our co-curricular, extracurricular activities, we also need to start to expend money on them. We need to expend on teachers, that's critical, but we need to expend, because people just don't know that there's a certain skill to all these things. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Higher order, can you see, you create at the top, you can evaluate and analyze, but at the bottom, why? What is the color? What is the, how many colors are in this room? How many people are in the room? You can start from there, but you need to start moving up, application, to analysis, to evaluation, to creation. And so that's why I think, that's where I think our curriculum has the most amiss. Apart from the fact, of course, that there's too much content, we really need to assess it. There's too much content, it's too deep. There's too much content, we do too many subjects. Why are we subjecting a child of 10 to about 13 subjects? What for? What for? And so we need to, so that's why I said we even need to look at our educational managers and take them through a whole process of training and of studying what is done elsewhere. When it comes to relevance, I mentioned it, that one critical factor with the educational system is relevance. Is it relevant? When I'm done, what will I do with it? Right now, for many, many students, it is not relevant. When people come to me, find me a job, what did you study? Philosophy. Okay. Where do you want to work? I always tell young people who study such things as philosophy. Philosophy is exciting. And it's good to learn. Take it as a base. And then go and look for maybe professional qualifications and so on to add to it. Because it's not going to get you a job. Because the workplace of today does not need many philosophers. The workplace of today should be focused on STEM and other things that will get them work in the workplace. But the way to do it, let me give you an example. Again, like I said, I'm trying very hard not to advertise anybody. But there was something that we tried to do in Lagos State, and that was to have what we called comprehensive schools. That is, every school. Why do you have 5 technical colleges, big colleges? Why don't we ensure that every child who leaves us has a skill? Because even the children in some of our schools who are able to pass WAEC and so on, they don't have the means to go to university. Some, it is that skill that will take them through university, even if it's as low a skill as tying daily. So I think it's time for us to rethink our technical training for secondary school and accept that a child or a student, a young person, a young teenager, well, not even getting to a young adult of 18 can and should be able to get a job. Look for a job. Use the skill sets that we've taught them. And there's no subject that is wasted. Use the skill set that we taught them and help them to get jobs when they go out in the workplace. I think we have to rejig the entire 6334 system. It can stay 6334. I would still leave it at 6334. But you see, I would insist that every secondary school brings out children with one skill or the other that is relevant in their community. If it's fishing, teach them how to fish in a modern way, give them skills of critical thinking, problem solving, get them to work within their community, get them internships and so. We have to get this thing to a more sophisticated level than just passing people out every year without caring what happens to them in the workplace.
Good. I'll just take one more question and then I'll turn it over to Pastor Sonny, who is on the platform, and also Jumoke to make a few comments and then take the Q&A. You mentioned something about British, and what has been bothering me, or what some people have been commenting, is that the kind of education that the British left behind for us is no longer relevant. A for Apple, B for B, Mungo Park discovered Richard Niger, Richard Clapperton did this, blah, 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 blah. All sorts of British things that almost, and then at some stage, the Nigerian government will try to take history out of the educational system and so on and so forth. Really, what do you think is the problem with education in Nigeria? And this thing that British did to us, how do we unbundle and unwind it? And that's my last question. There were 400 raised, and I would like to take space. And there are quite a lot of educationists here. I see Professor Odusonya here, who is the Vice Chancellor of Lagos University in Ikorodu. He's a great educationist, and I'm sure he may have one or two comments and so on and so forth. So please, over to you, my sister.
The British did it to us, but we have done it to ourselves because the British have moved on. I was part of a study group that went to the UK and visited schools. They are not doing what you talked about. They have moved on. We have not moved on. We need to move on. We need to move on. And that's why I think we need to sit down, really. That's why, remember when I said the main problem is, what is our vision for education? Why are children going to school? Is it to learn that Clapperton developed? I can't even remember what he discovered. But that thing was there, and there were people living there before he came. So what we have to do is a total rethink, I think. We need to have, we need our leadership to understand that we cannot put a plaster on a cancerous wound. We have to be radical. We have to transform. I know people are afraid when you start saying transform, be radical. But we have to, because at the end of the day, we are educating our children and they're not able to do anything. We have to be more intentional about why we are running school, about why we are building schools, universities, why we are training students, why we are training teachers. We have to be more intentional. And that means that we have to galvanize the whole society. Talking about history was restated. You know the problem with history. It's now permeated everything. We are not getting graduates who studied history. We've been trying to get history teachers in Lagos State for a while. There are hardly any graduates of history. There are some subjects you can't get teachers for anymore. History, geography. And these are critical and important subjects. Do you remember the Pampas of Argentina? Do you remember the what you call Guinea? All the regions in Africa. I've forgotten. Sorry. Too much in my brain. So
Mansa Musa, Songhai Empire.
Do you remember Songhai Empire or your empire, Borno Empire, the Fulani Jihad? Do you remember? But we are not getting people who are studying these anymore. So again, that's why there's got to be an intentionality about it. If you decided that you are going to teach history, then you must prepare teachers of history. You can't just say, okay, start teaching history. We developed a history curriculum in our primary school. That curriculum is even quite interesting because we did a lot with drawings, pages, making it really tactile, appealing to their sensorial, to the sensorial part of children, discuss in your groups and so on and so forth. Talk to your grandma, talk to somebody at home. But we cannot get teachers of history. And so again, intentionality. So I think maybe first of all of us are talking. Maybe we need to start to say, maybe we need a concerted vision across the whole country about why we are, of what we want to do with education. Maybe the first thing I did when I got to Lagos City, what do you want a Lagos State graduate from our public schools to be like at the end of 6 years with us, at the end of 12 years? And people said a lot of things. Passionate, visionary, God-fearing, blah, 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 clever, problem solver, creative. It doesn't happen because you said it. It will happen because you intentionally design a program that will graduate that child. And so I think for me, we have to start to think, what do we want to send children to school for? And if that is it, then intentionally, deliberately, and develop our own unique and peculiar system. And not that one look at somebody's system. The British have moved on since. They don't, all this one we are doing, they are not doing it. Even if you see the way they are running their public schools, it's they've moved on, and we too need to move on. You know, I know that most people don't know me well, know that I want to be radical about this. I want us to be radical. I want us to change, to change. Because change now we have no choice. We can see that everything that we are doing is coming out mediocre or shambolic. Thank you. Pastor, where are thou?
Yeah, I'm handing over to Sonny. Sonny,
Okay.
comments, please, and please help with the Q&A. Yeah, I didn't run away. No, I didn't go back to school. Is Sonny not there?
You did say we grew
He's
up
here.
in Ibadan.
He's there,
We
but
are
he's not talking.
You know, we grew up in Ibadan. We are troublesome people.
I know.
I'm still troublesome. I want
I see where Damola gets his trouble from. And I thought you were gentle. I didn't know that.
gentle at all.
Jumoke, I think Sonia has run away. Can you help us, please?
He's on. He might be in a place where
he's muted. Maybe he doesn't know he's muted.
Pastor Sonny, please.
Because he spoke a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, Afolabi wants to ask some questions. Hawi, I don't know who Hawi, please identify yourself. Otherwise, we may not call you. Zachary Zundu also wants to ask some questions. And iPhone. So maybe we should take Afolabi's question, Zachary's question, and I'd like Hawi and iPhone to please identify themselves.
And
thank you.
Lara also has her hand up, and we have a couple of other people with their hands up.
Okay. Can I go?
Yeah,
please,
go.
Afolabi, go.
Okay, good. Good evening. My apologies for my earlier interruption. I think my first two questions, I think Pastor has already touched on it a bit. I'd just like to know what you feel when you were Commissioner of Lagos State, what you feel was your biggest contribution, and what you feel that you made the biggest change you made, and you were successful about it. And then part B of that one is, what would you have liked to have done and accomplished that you could not do, or you did not manage to be able to do? And finally, since you were talking of WAEC, what are your thoughts on the latest WAEC exam results scandal? That she says she didn't manipulate, WAEC says that she manipulated the results and everything.
That was JAM, not WAEC.
Oh, sorry, JAM. Sorry, my apologies, JAM. Sorry, I was getting mixed. Sorry, JAM.
I'll start with the JAM thing because first of all, I'm not happy that a young child is subject to. I don't think a young child should be attacked and vilified like that. I'm surprised that her teachers and adults around her are not the ones that are addressing the issue. I'm so sorry that she's traumatized like that. I'm not saying she's right or wrong. I'm just saying I don't think a young child should have been attacked like that. So that's number one. Number two, I don't think it's that difficult for JAMB to be able to tell us the scores, to show the raw scores. I don't think so. We have an exam board in Lagos State, And that exam board sets questions and marks online. We have a CBT exam for entrance to model colleges. If there's any controversy, we can bring out the child's script, the online script. So I think they should give us the online script and stop all. I don't think we should be bouncing back on. It's not that difficult, and that's just my issue about it. My issues are two: the safety, the emotional, and even physical safety and well-being of that child, and then secondly, the need to. The fact that I don't think it's very difficult. So now you talk about me, and I remember this is not about me, and I try to make it not about me at all. But if I were to talk about 2 or 3 things that I think number one was learning outcomes, because I have run schools before. And one thing I am certain of is you don't need to cheat for children to do well. When there's good teaching, the average, the ability of students is a normal curve. I don't think WAEC is that difficult, but it's a gatekeeper, and therefore it has assumed a monstrous proportions, and people will do anything to pass it. And so when I came in, one of the first things I did was look back at the history of performance in the state, and looking at that history of performance and saying, look, I'm not, we can't sit like this. Although I can't sit in my office and be happy with myself when my students are not doing well. And so we had to set in, I had to call the Tutor General PAMSEX, the directors and so on. I talked to all subject associations, maths, English, went around the state. I'm sure I've been to virtually everywhere in the state, talking to teachers, having meetings. Now, what do? We are all teachers, we are professionals. How do you improve performance? So we tracked this subject by subject. Looking at English, we found that the poorest results were recorded in literature and English. Literature, actually, English a bit better. And so how do we improve all this? So we started having deliberate strategies for each subject. And so over the next 2 years, the results improved significantly. And it went from 39% to 79% passing WAEC. Now you've heard me talk about WAEC. It's not that I think that is the be all and end all, but since that is the gatekeeper that we have in Nigeria, better help children do well in it. And so it went up to 79. It dropped a bit the year after to 75 for various reasons, but I'm sure we are working on it again. Then we started, and honestly, there were more than 20 strategies deployed, up to past question papers, sharing of teachers, using consultants, giving the children textbooks. We gave some devices. It just like 20 different strategies. Each school and each district was able to look into itself and say, where are my weakest subjects? Who is my best biology teacher? Help me go around and support the others. And this led to a tremendous improvement in performance. I think for me, that is number one. Because why are the students going to school? The second one was done for the primary schools in thinking that, look, the students who are leaving school in primary 6 not able to read. What was the point then? Why wasted 6 years or 7 or 8 years? So we entered into a relationship with a technical partner, and we got an agreement today was that students will read from primary 1 at age appropriate level, of course. And so that's what we did. So they worked with us, put our scheme, Lagos State scheme, not any body scheme, Lagos State scheme. We set out our schemes of work. We actually worked on our schemes of work over like 1 year. We worked with professional organizations, we worked with NGOs, with individuals, with teachers, with private schools to develop a scheme that was inclusive of 21st century skills, inclusive of web links, and just, focused on improving teaching and learning. And that is what Lagos State schools now use. Even private schools, even other states have got it. So with our primary school partners, we put that scheme on our tablet, on the teacher's tablet. And so with a lot of suggestions for teaching in class. And some people have said we removed the creativity of the teachers. I think we did that because, first of all, better to have scripted lessons and let the teachers improve over time. I expect the teachers to improve as they keep on using the scripted lessons and they see that they can do other things other than the lecture method that they are taught, I don't know, in their initial teacher training, so that the classes are full of activities, there's teamwork and collaboration, a lot of critical thinking, and for child 5 textbooks. So I think those 2 things. And the third for me would be that we tried to do this comprehensive schools, where we said every school should be able to teach students skills. Now, we were not able to succeed. We started with a pilot of 12. For funding reasons, we just never exceeded the 12. But I still get reports every day. We sent our teachers to Finland on training, and they came back, and they are superb teachers. We took in teachers. We did not take a beard to be teaching children how to do fashion design or plumbing. No. We actually took artisans, and we taught them how to teach. We also collaborated with private organizations. There were private organizations who set up workshops for us, private organizations who funded tablets for each of the students. And then, of course, we underlaid all that with a lot of teaching about financial literacy. We worked with organizations like Junior Achievement for Entrepreneurship, teach them how to really set up. So they were really setting up. One of our schools set up a bricklaying factory from their comprehensive school. So I think those three things, I wish I'd done more with the comprehensive schools. The other one I wasn't very happy with was the management of private schools. I felt that we were not able to develop the guidelines. The guidelines were not workable, they were onerous, and they were obviously not, we couldn't. You can't say in Lagos that a school must have a playing field. The place is so built up that what you've just got to have to say. I went to schools, like I said, in the UK, and I saw schools in the middle of Sheringham and so on that didn't have a play field, but were able to cleverly look for play spaces and so on for the children. So these are things that we need to rethink in our guidelines. So I wish I had done that. We started it, but we didn't complete it. And there are many other things that I think I tried to do. Infrastructure, I generally do not talk too much about infrastructure, but more than almost 2,000 projects were done. And if you look at the secondary schools in the state, they are in fair state. Like I said, we are not the funding, we're not the statutorily required to fund primary schools, but we funded the Eco-Excel program for primary teaching, and we also funded furniture for some of our schools, building renovation of many primary schools, even though statutorily we were not supposed to. But like I said, I did not come in here to be commissioner for secondary school. We have to look at all schools across the state. So I think for me, and then I wasn't clear enough about the pipeline to secondary school. And by the way, I should add that our JAMB results were so good that the best result was 152, a confirmed 152, by the way. No controversy. So I think things have changed, especially as far as learning is called. And the other things, I mean, I can talk about other things, but I think those were the big ticket items for me, especially, and maybe the curriculum, preparing that curriculum, and really working with British Council and so many organizations to look at Nigeria's curriculum and just set it out as it should be, as good as it can be and should be. And I think we did that. And we were working on assessment, moving our assessment up Bloom's taxonomy when I spoke to you, because we had done a lot of training with our exams board and so on, so that we start to set questions that are more focused on critical thinking. There's a lot more, but I did my bit. You can never do more than your bit. You have just a 3.5 years. A very bureaucratic system. Don't forget, I worked in private sector. You approve something on Monday, by Friday, they start implementing. You approve something on Monday, about 4 months later, funds are released. So it's a different milieu, but you learn to work with it. And I appreciate the opportunity given to me. I will always appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Ma. Pastor Sonny. Okay, so we have about 8 hands up, Ma. Thank you so much for such a brilliant presentation. I know you're very passionate about it, and thank you for the work you've done in Lagos State and the work you continue to do in this space. So do you want to take a group of questions, maybe 3 at a time? That way you can address all of them at once, or what's your preference? 2 or 3 at a time?
Oh, I didn't bring my notebook. I was going to write.
So do you want me to capture it while we are asked? I can capture it. I can write it.
Okay, you can capture.
You.
Maybe if you capture it somewhere, because I'm looking at the meeting chat. I'm going through the meeting chat even as we're talking.
Okay, because there are some questions in the meeting chat. So I'll capture the questions. So we'll take 3 at a time. And then, so I'm going to ask Mr. Ayodeji to please go ahead and unmute yourself. And if you can keep the question brief, thank you.
Yeah.
Succinct, thank you. Go ahead, sir. Unmute yourself, sir. Mr. Ayodeji, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Really enjoying this session. It's a very, very valuable discourse. My question goes as thus. I look at public and private schools because Madam was able to talk more about what is going well in the private schools and what we are trying to adopt in Lagos to make it like the private school. But to me, like she said, learning for skills is the ultimate thing. In the public schools that we went when we were going to school, there are certain things we learned that combined with our education, and that is the street knowledge. There's none of that in the private sectors because I've been able to teach in both sides. And for you to be able to handle things around the world, even when you become a graduate or you're even a secondary school holder, even a common school cert holder, because I could recall when we were in school, a school cert holder is as mature as a graduate today. So that's street knowledge that's missing out. How can we have it too in the current public sector thing? Because I know about a lot of reform you've done in the public sectors in Lagos, but that street knowledge is still missing. Like we had it when we were growing up in Ibadan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Anthony, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Go ahead, sir. Okay. Okay, we're going to take Lara if we can't get Mr. Anthony. Please go ahead, Lara, and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, sorry. I didn't know my name had changed to Anthony. My name is Bayo. So sorry.
Your name is showing as Anthony on the screen.
I don't know how that happened. I'm so sorry.
Okay, please. Okay, that's okay. Please go ahead with your question.
Okay. Madam, thank you so much, ma. I'm so grateful. We need the likes of you in Abuja, and I hope that it happens soon. My question is this, ma. I want to ask about special education. I mean, education for children with disability. And what do you think about it? And I know you don't want to talk about your experience, but if you would like to, put perspective into it in terms of the way Lagos State handled it, I'll be very grateful, ma. And I also want to ask about what you think about reinforcing and encouraging creativity and innovation in terms of teaching. I mean, for the teachers themselves, how does the system reward creativity and innovation? And I think that will be it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lara, with your question.
Good morning, good afternoon, Ma. I'm so delighted to have you join us today, and I think it's my prayer answered. I have been silently crawling your work actually in Lagos State for the past almost 4 years, right? I have done some work with, I have an NGO which has really been positioned to help infuse some, drop of hope in education in the past 9 years in Nigeria. And we operate in about 7 states now. Lagos, we just started to it before the pandemic. And my organization was one of those that partnered with Lagos State during the pandemic for some teachers training and all that. And I'm glad that you really opened the Pandora box of the issues we have in our education sector in Nigeria, ranging, you highlighted, and I know if we give you 10 hours, you can't even go down the list. So I know for the sake of time, you barely scratch on the surface of the issues, from education policy to funding to curriculum, training, teachers recruitment, infrastructure, technology infusion, and so on and so forth. You have walked that path and you've worked it successfully in the private sector. You took it to Osun State and then you brought it to Lagos State. And every time, one of my question is really from your experience over the years, you know, doing exactly the same thing and trying to really create change in the area of education in Nigeria, and with what you know today. From your experience, I don't know if you will agree with me that being part of the system is probably a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of you doing what you really need to do. Because again, there's a lot of gag order in the bureaucracy. And I'm sure you have a lot of experience with that. We can see that we're not short of ideas. We're not short of highlighting the issues and what should be done. But what I think and what I'm thinking, looking at all the states that I have personally journeyed through in Nigeria, I come to Nigeria about 3 or 4 times a year, going into the public schools to see what's going on in the classrooms. And I know exactly what you're talking about with all of the things you have laid out. Now, I wanted to ask you, if you are to be given the opportunity to be the Minister of Education, or at the helm of affairs of education in Nigeria, because I believe all of these things that we're talking about, even for some of us that have NGOs that are trying to partner with the system, it requires an appetite, a leader, a champion that really is passionate about education, that is intentional and that is radical. And I like the fact that you use that word radical. And I'm glad that you are retiring now so that you can really truly be radical and not have to answer to anyone in terms of your mission around that. So if you are given that chance, what are the DNAs that you will look for in appointing commissioners and those who sit at the helm of affairs for the education, be it at the local government level, at the state level? What would you be looking for in those people that really need to drive this education to the next level? What are those things you will look for that will make that person a true stakeholder? And a true stakeholder, and I'm going, and my pause on this is people who truly have stake in the affairs of Nigeria, not somebody that has sent all of their kids outside of the country to receive education, and they think they're doing the country a favor, and they are the commissioner of education, and so on and so forth. So I want to hear your pause on that, and on what you will do and what you will look for. I know it's a long question.
Very long.
But maybe I can summarize it that if she was the Minister of Education and she has to appoint commissioners or those that would champion maybe education reforms, what are the qualities or criteria that she'll be looking for in those persons? Does that summarize your question appropriately, Lara?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, thank you. So that's Lara's question. Then question from Mr. Ayodeji. He talked more, and I will translate. He said, how do we include street training in education? There is no street knowledge. Currently, there is no street knowledge in education right now. And I'm thinking that's probably critical thinking. Then Mr. Bayo said his question, 2-part question, special need education. How would you, how should that be handled, and how did Lagos State handle that? Then how should teachers be rewarded for innovation and creativity? So those are the 3 questions. You want to group them together because we have about 8 hands up. So I'm trying to keep, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'll try. I've been thinking through that. What on earth is street knowledge? How can I interpret it? Where do you learn street knowledge but on the streets? So, not being street smart. I think, look, education is a tripartite kind of thing. The child, the parent, is even many stakeholders, the community, and so on. The parents too. Okay, street smart. You say, I remember a colleague saying he wanted to check if his son was street smart and dropped him and said, find your way home. Very near the house, and the boy just stood there and was playing ball. But I said, you can't just do that. You must have trained the child yourself on how to move about before you start dropping him in the middle of nowhere and saying, go home by yourself. So in other words, what I think we have to do with a lot of these things is to ensure that the home, the community, and the school work together to bring up children. And if we interpret it as critical thinking is not a subject. The way you can't treat it as this. You can't say, no, now it's time for critical thinking and problem solving. What you do is you integrate it, you fuse it, you make sure that it is part of everything that you are teaching. You can teach it in English. You can teach it in math. The way you couch your math questions will make the person think critically. Maybe you listen to me when I talked about the I. The way you ask questions will make a child think critically. Remember the Bloom's taxonomy that we looked at? If you move up Bloom's taxonomy and start to look at analysis and evaluation and so on, you see that you are teaching people to look at situations, analyze them, and come to their own conclusions. And reflect, think upon things, and modify their thoughts if necessary, ask questions, get learning from others. The way you teach all these things is through the way you ask questions. It's through the way you discuss. The teacher discusses in class, which brings me to the teacher. A teacher can only give of what he or she has. When a teacher has been taught by people who cram and pour, when a teacher is taught by just lecture method, the teacher will just be a lecturer and just be pouring, or writing notes on the board for the poor children to copy. When they can go to Google and find out what the person has written, they don't need to copy anything. But what we have to do is to integrate it again in our teacher training curriculum. The way we, even a little thing like a child comes to your class and behaves this way. I remember a parent, years ago, someone said, I watched a TED talk where he said, this child was very difficult in school. No, I will tell you about one of my students. Her mother was so unhappy about her. She's so restless. She's everywhere. She goes here, she goes there. One day, I was watching this girl. She didn't know I was watching her. I was principal, yeah. I was watching her. She was dancing. She was singing. She was happy. When the mother came, I said, she's a great dancer. She's a great entertainer. She likes people watching her. She has, we have to now find a way to help this girl. And that is why the mantra of a teacher, I will tell you my own mantra as an educationist, is that there's a sweet spot, an A star, minimum one, and usually many, in every child. It doesn't have to be subjects. It could be abilities, it could be attributes, it could be skills, it could be knowledge. It's my job to find that out and help that child optimize whatever is great within him or her. And I think that is what we'll get if we also make our teachers understand that they have to also think critically in order to be able to teach children to think critically. So I think you asked me about that. When it comes to special needs, special needs is critical, again, because there are many children. This is when you talk of equity, when we said equity, children of the poor are not getting enough education. Equity is also in terms of gender, is also in terms of financial circumstances, and is also in terms of learning challenges, because children who are learning challenged find it very difficult here to get education. And so as a state, and please, like I said, I didn't come here to talk about that, and I didn't come here to blow my own trumpet. I hope people who know me know I'm a very modest person, and this is a bit difficult for me. But Lagos State has that, so I'll say it's Lagos State. It's not me, because I met it there and built on it, did what I could to build on. In which case, I think at this juncture, I'd like to say that Lagos State has had some great commissioners for education, and I thank all of them because I stood on the shoulders of giants. The when I got in, there was a whole department and we had 31 special needs schools, primary and secondary. So, and then there were also schools, the inclusive. That is where children who were abled were there with children who were otherwise abled. And we also had now exclusive schools, like schools for the deaf, school for children with cognitive impairment, like the Murikweko School, for instance, and so on. And school, and so the state has done that and is able to therefore educate many children. The state also, don't forget that Lagos State has an inclusive recruitment policy. You see, before you get into somewhere, you never know. It looks like look at Alausa, people coming, all sorts of people. Is this even a place where people think? Do you know that Lagos State has an inclusive policy and 10% of all recruitments are people who have learning challenges or disabled or otherwise disabled? So that means we have teachers in Lagos State who are blind, who are themselves blind. And they also teach students who are themselves visually impaired. We have teachers who are hearing impaired, and they teach children who are hearing impaired as well. And so there's a whole structure for managing this. It's not big enough, and we could do with more, absolutely. We could do more, and there are some parts of the state that are so far away, difficult for children in those areas to get to the 31 schools. But I think it's a fair effort, and many states have come to find out how it has been done. And of course, working collaboratively, the state works collaboratively with a lot of organizations, not just doing it all by itself. So we have people who train, and this is where I will remember my dear late friend, Dr. Yinka Akindayomi, who worked with us with the special needs school. She owns the Children's Development Center in Surulere, and she was able to, she gave us, in fact, she used to train our teachers and give them starter kits for teaching all these children. So again, just a collaborative effort and a deliberate effort, intentional effort. There's another question I think I'm missing.
Yeah, the one from Lara that talked about what you'll be looking for.
I think we need someone. I'm not, and please don't be annoyed with me if I say it doesn't have to be somebody who is just, I think we need a great collaborator, someone who can collaborate and work with everybody, someone who is visionary and focused, someone who knows that we need to change. I think that's it. I think someone who is energetic and vigorous and able to, because to be the Commissioner for Education, you're a minister, you must go across the whole state, the whole country. So, and understand that different parts of the country have different needs, different experiences, different problems, and all these have to be solved. So I think for me, I would always look for vision and focus and passion. Creativity, innovation, someone who's had an exciting track record of performance. Honestly, I don't think it necessarily has to be someone who is steeped in education. I think it'd be good, but if not, somebody who is steeped in transformation, I think would be great.
Thank you, Ma. So we have about 8 hands and some questions in the chat. So we're going to try to take them as quickly as possible. So we're going to just beg you, we're going to ask you to please keep your questions very brief so that we can take
I think that's important.
Yeah, please. Very brief, 30 seconds.
Hold them to 1 minute. Please.
Yeah, we appreciate, we know that you appreciate her, so please keep to the point. Miss Amina Zakari, please go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll ask Aderonti. I'm not sure if it's male or female, doesn't have your pronoun, so forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Go ahead, Amina, with your question. And then we'll take Aderonti. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been refreshing to listen to Madam. However, I'm not an educationist, but I joined the session in solidarity to my sister, who is an educationist, just like Madam. She runs a school. She has been a commissioner of education. She's passionate about education like Madam. My problem is I've seen how she's been struggling running the school, and she's been struggling to be a good educationist with not much support and success. I've noticed that in Kano State, where she runs the school, the governor, the immediate past governor has been charging them taxes for what they've made in the schools, and there's not enough to run a private school because they don't have much enrollment, and the governor has been taxing them. I've always felt that there should be some collaboration, like you mentioned in your lecture, between the private sector, faith-based schools, and the government. I've always felt that government should be able to, the private sector should be able to absorb some of the students that are out of school, put them in these private schools that hardly fill their classes, and be able to, reduce the numbers out of school. Rather than tax a private school, I think they should even be subvented as a form of a collaboration so that they can actually remove most of these children out of school. But in your mentioning of the collaboration, if you can please give us more specifics about the kind of collaboration. What I've mentioned is one of the collaborative ways, but if there could be more collaboration between government, faith-based, and private schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Aderonsi, please go ahead with your question. Less than a minute, please. If you're muted, but we can't hear you, so I'm going to ask Ivy to please unmute. Maybe there's something wrong with your audio. Ivy, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. My name is Ivy Masher. I'm connecting from Houston, Texas. I'm a graduate of Corona School and Ujeniki. My concern is that when I left Corona, which was the private sector of education, and I moved to Ujeniki, that was my first encounter with disabled children, visually impaired, more or less kids. Now, as a graduate, I, through my old student association, became conversant with the fact that on the day of WAEC, one of the final mock exams, a visually impaired child was prevented from writing the exam because they hadn't paid money. They were owing a large amount of money in school fees. So after this came to my attention, I took it upon myself to start paying the school fees of all the visually impaired children in Ijaniki. The second problem I had, now, when I'm done paying these school fees, what is the future for these children? I say this because I have one visually impaired Ijaniki graduate who also went to university. I can't remember exactly what he studied, but now I've basically had to put him on payroll because of the country's economy. So every month I send him some money to manage himself. So my question is this: how is the education system? Well, what can the education system do to, first of all, I think visually impaired children should be educated free. And secondly, not just free, but giving the tools to face the challenges of the society in Nigeria to survive, to be able to feed. Because now I have like 8 children and I'm thinking—
Miss Ivy, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you. Do you
when
mind
they graduate,
wrapping,
what's
please?
their future?
Thank you.
What's their future? So that's my concern.
Thank you. So you want to find out what tools can be given to the physically challenged and what is their future when they graduate from school. So those are your 2 questions. Thank you. May I ask Ms. Ronke to please go ahead and ask her question? Thank you. Ms. Ronke, please go ahead with your question. Unmute yourself. Okay, I'm going to ask Dr. Bukola to please go ahead and unmute. Dr. Bukola Dusumu, please go ahead with your question.
Good evening.
Go ahead with your question.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Dr. Bukola Dusumu.
Okay, please go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, good evening. Thank you very much for the session. I have 2 questions that I'm going to straight away. The first is the comprehensive schools, Ma. If someone is interested, there are quite a number of us that are actually interested in being immersed in the processes that you are able to use to start the comprehensive schools and to keep them running. How do we get these supports for our schools, for wherever we run our various centers? I am calling you from Abuja. The second question I have is, I know that you did a lot regarding the class keeping, underage children that go into secondary schools and then into universities. Now you're out of the system. What did you leave behind? And then what can you give, what do you have that we can continue to use to run and advocate for primary 6? Because it's just very obvious that we seem to be the only nation in the world. I always tell people to correct me, if there's any other nation in the world that disregards the age appropriateness of children in schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Ma, we have those three questions. Do you want me to repeat them?
Please.
Okay. So the one from Amina, in summary, is
There's
collaboration.
an echo. I don't know.
There's an echo, yes. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's better.
So from Amina, the summary of that question is promoting collaboration between private and public schools and how to absorb some of these kids maybe into public schools. She talked about the taxes, using Kano State as an example, that there isn't, when they tax, then there isn't enough funds to really go back to manage the private school efficiently. So she wants to learn more about that collaboration between the private and public schools. Then Ivy talked about the kids' special needs and what tools can be given to these kids or these pupils when they graduate, and how can they be gainfully employed. And then Dr. Bukola Dusumu talked about how can they get support to operate comprehensive schools, part 1. And then the second one is, what do you have to advocate for primary 6? I believe, Dr. Dusumu, that was the question in terms of advocacy for primary 6 education. That's what I captured.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate all these questions. The first one is it's a great question, and I thank you very much. I think, Amina, am I right? Yes, I think, and a great solution as well. It's a great idea that out of school children, like we said, we are not going to be able to build schools. So why can't government fund them in private schools? It's a possibility. It's worth thinking through. These are things like charter schools that they do in other countries and that work well. It means that the state has a lot of funding. It is possible, and it is a great strategy. In fact, I've noted it down and said that it's a way one will always encourage that this is a workable solution. Because I totally understand when you say your sister is struggling with her school, with low enrollment. If there is low enrollment, there's low capacity. So why can't we use the existing capacity to send children to such schools? So thank you very much. It's a great idea. I think it's workable. I think it's eminently workable. The second question about the blind children at Tijani, that's a federal government college where they do charge fees. In Lagos State, education is totally free from early years in a public schools, from early years to SS3. So the choice of going to any other school is the child's own choice. I would like to say that. And it's a great idea that children should go to school, that children with learning challenges, with visual impairment or any other impairment, should go to school and be educated free. I totally agree with you. I think this is up to states. Like I said again, it's all the same. They say there's no funding, there's no this, there's no that. But these are strategies that can and should be pursued. And I think it's a great idea. I mean, I would do it. Like I said, we'll do it in Lagos State. We don't ask it. People have been in Modupe School for 30, 40 years. People with cognitive problems. They've been there for 30, 40 years. Nobody has charged them a penny. They live there, they eat there. So, and that's what the state has been doing. That's why I said this state has been doing some really great things. And like I said before I came, So it's not, I'm not trying to say I did it. Then the third question.
So there's a slight edit to the last question, which is the age appropriateness for each grade.
Age appropriateness.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was asking at the last. Yeah, the primary 6 thing. The primary 6 thing is happening because of parents. Because parents, you have to do a lot of advocacy with parents. Secondary schools have to insist that they are not taking underage children, but they are. And even federal government colleges take underage children. No matter what you fight, you see that they can get into a school somewhere. And so it means all of us again coming together and agreeing that a child should not enter secondary school until they are 12 or 11 or whatever. But when we tried to do it, the whole social media went crazy. That don't I know they should graduate by the time they are 20, that the Nigerian universities always closed down for long periods, so the students don't graduate till they're in their mid-20s. So that means they won't get a job in PricewaterhouseCoopers because they insist people should be under 25, and so on and so forth. And then you say, oh, where do you draw the line? Why should a child of 8 or 9 be attempting to go to secondary school? A lot of it is parents, a lot of it is schools as well, who succumb to this pressure. When I was in a place like Corona, I did not take a child from primary 5, no matter what the child scored. You won't even allow the child to take the phone because you must bring your report card for your 6. So we see that you really are a primary 6 child. But if all schools insist and do this, then we'll be able to do the right thing. But it's just that people are cutting corners. And a lot of parents think, if I can get out of paying fees for primary 6, then I'll be able to save for university. So again, it's a societal problem that is way more than schools doing anything about, but the whole society fighting against what is not working in our best interest. Because what happens at the end is that the child is 14. You don't want a 14 or 15-year-old in university. It's an adult environment. It's an adult environment where they are free, and that's where the trouble starts for many of them who are seriously immature. You don't want that. It starts when they're in secondary school. Many of them don't do as well as they should, but when they get to university, it's even worse. So I think it's a societal problem that we all have to address.
And then the other question she had asked was the support that they could get to operate comprehensive.
Okay, well, the comprehensive school model has a lot of supporters. People who've shared their curriculum, people who've built workshops, people who've trained teachers, people who've supplied equipment, and so on. So it's just by writing to the ministry, the permanent secretary.
Thank you. We're going to try to see if Ms. Ronke can unmute now. Ms. Ronke, can you unmute your phone now?
I've tried though.
Okay. Okay, now we can hear you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm not asking, I want to make 2 quick comments. Pastor Itua did not finish our guest introduction properly. Our mother, Ms. Adefisayo's mother, too, was a teacher, and she's still alive in her 90s. I'm sure that's where she got the teaching bug from. Congratulations, Shade. As an old girl of Queen's School, I'm so very proud of you. I want to make a comment. Where did you get your passion from? Was it inherited? How can we pass all this kind of passion to other people? Because people don't think too much of teachers. They call it graduate unemployment. But I know it is better now. Please, I admire your passion. I am very, very happy and I'm very proud of you. Up Queen's School. So please tell us how you got your passion. Partly from your mom. I finished my observation.
Okay. Thank you, Ma.
And, thank you. A good question.
Yeah.
There are a number of old girls on here. On
the platform.
I think yes, on the who are listening in. I think it's all part of how we were brought up. In that environment, which wasn't a fancy environment, but it was an environment where you just were taught to do the right thing. And so I think I appreciate that. And my mom at 92, I'm sure she's also listening somewhere. At 92, was my principal at a point and my maths teacher. And I would like to say that when I was very young, both my parents were teachers. My father was a physics teacher.
Oh, no wonder.
Maths teacher.
But I mentioned it now. I said her mother was an educationist. And that her sister runs a school in Ibadan. Abi, did I not say so?
You said so, Pastor.
I said so.
Thank you.
Oh, so we'll take, please go ahead, Zachary, go ahead and ask your question. Please keep it brief. We had more hands come up and we're coming up on the hour. So
do we have a cutoff time?
Yes,
please?
we have a cutoff.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm not asking a question. I'm making very brief comments. I'm a teacher and I'm very proud of it. I'm currently a sitting vice chancellor at the University of Nkar in Benue State. 3 things I want to say. The first is that the challenge we have currently in education in this country is traceable to the fact that we didn't delink from the British system. When the British introduced education to us, they wanted to educate people to service the colonial enterprise. And because of that, we had a particular curriculum, we had a particular content for education. And when we got independence, instead of delinking and establishing the purpose for our education, we didn't do that. If we did that, probably we would not be using the curriculum we are still using today and asking about relevance. The next thing is the issue of tertiary education, especially university education. There is nowhere in the world where universities, every university is a research university. In many parts of the world that are doing the proper thing, they are research universities and they are comprehensive universities. The research universities get more of the funding and they get better grade of teachers than the comprehensive universities, in such a way that those who are there are paid more, they pay more attention to them, they have more facilities. In this country, every other person who is in the university wants to be having the same salary with every other person who is in another university. It doesn't happen that way.
Sorry, sir. Sorry
So
to
the third thing I want to say, please
round off, sir.
Is that for
Thank
funding models, if you have an institution like TED Fund and they are just allocating funds to universities, there is no way universities can use these funds properly. People compete for funds if funds are available. If there's competition, they get the funds and they use them more properly than if you are just allocating. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So the last hand we are taking is Aderonti, because those were the hands that were up. So apologies that we can't take any more. Our guests, we're really coming up on the hour. Can we have Miss or Mr. Christopher? Please go ahead, keep it brief, please. And then Oniye and then Aderonti, please. Thank you.
All right, thank you, madam. I want to thank Mrs. Folasade. I really appreciate this discussion. But I have 2 questions. One, Ma, you remember you created a new curriculum in Lagos State, and publishing houses are finding it very difficult to adapt their book to the new curriculum in Lagos because the NRDC, which is the national body for curriculum development in Nigeria, have not keyed into the Lagos curriculum, nor have they even thought of changing the curriculum in Nigeria. Ma, how do we solve this problem? Because publishers cannot create books strictly for Lagos State. Publishers need to create books for the nation. So there's a problem. And Lagos curriculum, which you developed with your team, seems to be very comprehensive. That is what the country needs. But the challenge now is NRDC are adamant to change the curriculum they have now. Secondly, many organizations like World Bank, USAID, UNICEF, UNESCO, they want to fund education in Nigeria. But in the past 8 years, more of their fundings are going to the north. Less to nothing comes to the southwest and the south-south. What is the reason for that? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Can we have the next hand up, which was Oniye? Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner. My question is just going to align very closely with the last speakers. So in your experience as an immediate outgoing commissioner, how would you see the alignment at the federal and state levels when we talk of reforms? Because at the moment, we know Nigeria does not have like a national education sector plan, so states develop their own sector plans. So if states are reforming and there is no alignment with UBEC and therefore SUBEB, how does this create problem for governance and management of education at the state level, which is where primary education actually lies most? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Aderonti, please. Aderonti, please go ahead with your question. We can't hear you. Please speak up.
You cannot hear me. I'm speaking already.
If you could speak up, it's very faint.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
It's very faint. We can hear you, but it's faint.
Thank you, Honorable Commissioner, for the wonderful work you're doing in Lagos State. You said earlier that you have difficulty in getting teachers to teach history and geography. And my suggestion to you is maybe you should set up a scholarship scheme that will be tied up to those who would study these subjects in the university, and they will now be forced to come and teach in schools as a means of paying off their scholarship. It's a suggestion. Those subjects that you have difficulty getting teachers to teach, you can set up a scholarship scheme for students, indigenous students, who can come and study those subjects and then be made to teach maybe for 5 years after the qualification. That is my suggestion.
Thank you very much. Okay. So we have those three, and those were the last questions. So I can read them to you. Do you want me to read them to you?
Please.
Okay. So we had the gentleman talked about the challenges with NRDC and NERDC and the publishing the right curriculum, because apparently there's a challenge with that. How do you adapt that, and how do you solve that problem is what he's asking. Then Oniye talked about, oh, I missed Oniye's because I wrote another one. So Oniye may have to ask a question again.
No. I think Oniye was
You
quite
got
clear.
that?
It was a very similar question as well.
Okay.
How do we align
aligning the state and federal? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I wrote it on that one. Aligning state and federal.
Uh-huh.
And then the third one was a suggestion on setting up scholarship funds for those subjects that you are having difficulties getting teachers to teach, that once those scholarship funds are set up, they get trained in the subject and then they work to pay back their school fees.
Great suggestion. Again, it's workable, it's usable, and I've noted it actually. Thank you very much. I think that was a great suggestion. For the alignment, the Lagos State schemes of work are not outside the curriculum of the country, because you take your scheme from the curriculum. So it's a curriculum that is broken into schemes, maybe weekly, monthly, termly, and so on. So yeah, we did do that, but the thing that is not aligned with it is that it is not aligned with things like web links, where we said teaching methodologies, assessment methodologies, because we wanted it, like we would say a class in Lagos State, schemes of work. Normally they would say scheme 1, 2, these are things that you discuss. Well, we would say plenary session, then we would say things like, look, these are some of the skills that we expect you to teach with the scheme, maybe teamwork and collaboration, in which case you get your students to discuss among themselves, or you give them some critical thinking. Let's look at some issues with skin. What can go wrong? What are the diseases of skin? These are all things that are outside textbooks, unless the textbook wants to include it. So for me, I still think I would use, if I were a teacher, I would use the existing textbooks, but I would adapt my teaching to the scheme. The scheme will now say, you don't allow the textbook to dictate the classroom strategy. The textbook is a support, and that's how you should treat it. Because if you make it the crux of everything, then that means you just take a textbook and just teach whatever is in that textbook. You cannot even use a single textbook. You should be willing and open and ready to use myriad of sources. Even when we say that, oh, this is the scheme, we expect a teacher to go online and say, look, today I'm teaching the structure of the scheme. Who has done this? Somebody in Australia will say, this is how I taught it. Somebody in Croatia will say, this is how I taught it. Somebody in the US will say, this is how I taught it. You use all that. We don't want teachers to be people who just use a one-way traffic. So I think that publishers are just trying to ensure that the textbook is the only source, and that just cannot be for any good teacher. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are a couple of questions in the chat that I would read out to you. One of them, how can we integrate into the school curriculum at every level the basic need for personal, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up, for personal development and health?
And health.
Yes. And health. I'm going to mute everyone and then ask you to unmute again. Okay, so please go ahead, Ma.
Okay, I've unmuted myself. Okay. I think definitely, I'm not sure, but I think NERDC is looking into the possibility of something like personal health and hygiene, but there are subjects that incorporate health and hygiene into the daily, into the curriculum. And these are things that schools should teach. So I think it exists already. It's just that, a lot of the things that we were doing before still exist. It's just that we watered them down. And so we need to give them more strength and more voice.
Okay. One more question. What can the federal government do to ensure all the states in Nigeria take education improvement seriously, like what Lagos State is doing?
It's not the job of the federal government. I think it's our job. It's the people in the state who refuse to accept. In Lagos State, if you know what I went through as a commissioner in Lagos State, I think I will write a book. People abusing me left, right, and center. People sending messages. So like I too got really frightened. So maybe, and I felt that, look, I have to work. They have to see that I'm doing something. And I'm doing the same thing to the government. The people have to refuse to accept low standards. I had people who used to, if I tell them that we've done 20 schools, they will ask me, where are the 20 schools? And they would go there. If I say, oh, we trained our teachers on critical thinking in the classroom, I had people who will say, which side? Who is the person who trained them? What is the content of their curriculum? I had so many. Some of it was painful to take. I mean, I'm merely human, but I just had to learn from that. And I think it's the people refusing to accept low standards. It's very difficult in Lagos not to do anything. The people are too, they are very, what can I say? They will say their bit. I don't know how to describe it, but that is why in Lagos, you just have to do things. You can't sit there and not do anything. They will talk. And unless you are now so immune to it. And I guess I wasn't immune to those angry comments. And I'm grateful. for all of them. Even suggestions. Some people gave me the guy who gave me suggestions on English literature, I'll never forget him. He said, look, go to YouTube. All the texts are on YouTube. Play it to these children. They've never read the textbook before. Play it to them. They are visual children. They learn what they see. So, you know, and we took it. I was playing videotapes of some of the texts, the plays to these children. So, look, let me tell you, we are the ones who are going to do it. The federal government can try, but education is on the concurrent list. That means that the federal government has its own responsibility. The states have their own. You can't force any state to do what they don't want to do. It is the public. And that is why I'm doing this, because I'm a quiet person. Normally, you won't hear my voice at all. But I think I want to tickle every one of us and to start to say, in my state, what can we look at? Amina from Kano. Why can't that kind of suggestion keep on talking about it? One day, somebody will listen. Thank you.
Those are the last questions, but someone asked a very good question similar to what you were speaking on, which is the artificial intelligence in school, and how are the Nigerian schools preparing for that? So, and then I'll hand over to Mr. President for the closing remarks.
That was a tough question. Well, thank you very much for asking me. I am as tech savvy as I need to be, and I use artificial intelligence a lot, ChatGPT and so on. I use Bing, I use all those things. I think we have to accept that it has come, and it has come to stay, and how best we can use it. I think we need to study it, but I don't want to start saying this is how it will affect education. This is what we need to do in the classroom. But I've been reading a lot of texts from other countries about how they are handling this situation. And it's to accept, first of all, that, man, you can't wish it away. You know, when technology came, people were angry. Are they going to replace teachers? Are computers going to replace teachers? No, you know, and things like that. But, you know, you have to find a way to integrate it into what you are doing. So I guess, again, we just have to deliberately and intentionally develop plans to integrate it into whatever we are doing. So thank you for the question. Great question.
Thank you.
Great questions across board. Thank you.
And I must also tell you that we've been nominating ministers for appointment on this platform, and your name has come up for the Minister of Education. So we're putting your name out there. A lot of people have chatted, put in the chat that you should be the Minister of Education. And I think Lara was also alluding to that in her comments. So thank you very much. This has been very informative.
Can I comment on that? I
Yes.
think I thank you all. I thank you all. But please, I think I'd like to support. I'd like whoever it is to know that I'm willing to be a great support.
They're saying no, but we need you. Nigeria needs you. So we'll be rooting for you in the back here and hoping that someone with your passion, your commitment, and your zeal to really reform education is at the helms of the affairs of reform, of education reform in Nigeria. Thank you. Before I hand over to Mr. President, I also wanted to, we also have our own education. So I don't know if you want to speak about that, or you want us to call Mr. Pastor T to speak on CRC course. Because like you said, education is more than just in the classroom. Pastor T, can you unmute yourself and speak on the CRC course, please? Okay.
It's already after 7 remotely.
Okay. This is just the CRC course. ALG has launched a citizen responsibility course, and we have 5 modules just for you to be informed on what you need to know as a citizen in nation building, contributing to nation building. So please go ahead and fill out the form. The deadline is next week, and we'll be starting the classes on the 20th of July. So thank you. Faye, if you could please go ahead and post that link in the chat.
I think it's 30th of July.
20th of July is when we are starting.
30th.
Oh, 30th. Sorry, I misread that one. 30th of July. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm handing over to Mr. President now for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, my dear sister, Thank you. The comments have been fantastic. The reactions have been wonderful. Everybody seems to be so concerned about this education issue. And a lot of people are volunteering to contribute one thing or the other. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your love. I pray that this country continues to look for people like you, genuine, sincere people to continue to use to add value to this society. I wish you very well. My love to my bros, my love to my brothers, and of course your husband. And we'll catch up and talk and see how we can carry these conversations on Nigeria and especially on education forward. I want to thank everyone for being on the platform. God bless you all. Thank you for staying faith with us. If you have any suggestions, any ideas, anybody you'd like us to bring on the platform to talk to, can give us insights into this great country, Nigeria, we'd like to do that. And we're moving forward. We have decided on 4 areas that we're going to be doing: community engagement, education and information, diaspora management, and of course, leadership recognition. Those 4 areas, the ALG will be working deeply on. And anyone that wants to be part of it and join us and raise some serious money for us to fulfill these dreams, please come on board and let's make it happen. God bless you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. God bless you. God bless Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Itwa.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There's also our Rebuild Nigeria initiative tomorrow, our peace dialogue, 5 o'clock. And please, we're going to try and send the invites to everybody. Please try and be on that platform so we can talk about peace in Nigeria also. Thank you very much. I think we should have Mr. Bello Fadile on peace dialogue. He's been part of some processing.
I don't know what has happened to the Sultan and the Cardinal Naekon. Have you reached out to them? Because they told me, yes, they got your message, but I haven't heard anything. Because Jumoke told me I was going to send somebody to Cardinal Naekon personally. And I gave her the detail, the number of
we sent it.
PA, Mwazu.
We've sent all the information. I'll follow up with you afterwards, sir.
Okay.
Help us to get them, Colonel.
Yeah, I've talked to them. They said yes. But Naekon says he's waiting to hear from you. That I spoke to him personally.
Please talk to
Sultan, I spoke to his PA. He said yes, they are sent to the official.
He can get us a lot of people in Nigeria that need peace and reconciliation.
Yeah,
he was right there
really.
With them.
But since I'm not the one coordinating it, I'm the agent. I've talked to both of them. I've talked to the Sultan. I talked to his brother Mazu. That should send to the official email of the Sultan, which I did.
Okay, no problem.
Please
talk to him.
I'll call you, sir. I'll call you after this and give you an update of where we are.
Okay. No problem.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank
God
you,
bless
everyone.
you.
Have
Thank
a good
you.
one. God bless
Good night,
you.
Pastor Itwa.
Dr. Ekwe, I'm waiting to hear from you. Otherwise, I'm coming
God
to
bless.
capture inform from that place.
Good night, everyone. Uncle Oluwik, I think, yeah, thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay, good night, everyone. God bless
Good night. God bless you.
Okay. Good night, everyone. God bless you all. Have a blessed evening. Have a blessed weekend.
Hi, Uncle Falabi. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.